Imagine being surrounded by raging flames, smoke filling the air, and the only thing keeping you going is the thought of saving your babies. This is the story of a mother dog who defied the odds when the unthinkable happened. What she did next will leave you in awe. In the heart of a dense forest, a peaceful morning turned into chaos as a wildfire erupted, swallowing everything in its path. Trapped in this fiery inferno was a mother dog and her tiny, helpless puppies. Her fight for survival wasn't just for herself, but for the lives of her little ones. This is more than just a story about survival. It's about love, sacrifice, and the incredible bond between a mother and her young. It all began on what seemed like an ordinary day. The sun filtered through the dense canopy of leaves, casting intricate patterns of light and shadow onto the forest floor. The forest was alive with the gentle rustling of leaves, the soft coos of doves, and the occasional scamper of squirrels as they leapt between branches. The air was warm but pleasant, carrying the earthy aroma of damp soil and blooming wildflowers. Nestled in a small hollow, beneath the protective embrace of a towering oak tree lay Daisy, a golden retriever mix whose caramel-colored coat shone even in the muted light of the woods. She was the embodiment of motherhood, strong, nurturing, and fiercely protective. At her side were her 5 newborn puppies, tiny bundles of fur no larger than the palm of a hand. Their eyes were still sealed shut, leaving them to navigate the world through touch and smell. They wriggled and whimpered softly, each sound a testament to their reliance on their mother for warmth, nourishment, and safety. Daisy lay curled around them, her body a protective barrier against the outside world. For Daisy, the forest was more than just her home. It was her sanctuary, abandoned by her previous owners. She had wandered aimlessly until she found refuge in these woods. Here, she had carved out a life of her own, adapting to the challenges of the wild and learning to fend for herself. The hollow beneath the oak tree had become her safe haven, a place where she could nurture her puppies without fear. Life, though far from easy, had been peaceful until that fateful day. Miles away, a spark was born in the heart of the forest. It was a small, inconspicuous ember at first, barely noticeable amidst the sprawling underbrush. It could have been anything: a stray lightning strike, a careless flick of a cigarette butt, or the remnants of an unattended campfire. But what started as a flicker soon grew into something far more menacing. The forest, parched from weeks of relentless heat and little rain, was a tinderbox waiting to ignite. Dry leaves, brittle twigs, and sun-scorched grass fed the flames, which began to spread with alarming speed. The wind, once a gentle breeze that carried the sounds of the forest, turned into an unrelenting force that fanned the flames, pushing them forward like a predator on the hunt. Trees succumbed to the inferno, their leaves turning to ash and their trunks splitting with loud, resounding cracks. The fire devoured everything in its path, leaving behind a barren, smoldering wasteland. As the fire advanced, the animals of the forest became aware of the looming danger. Birds that once perched serenely in the trees took flight in chaotic flocks, their cries piercing the air. Deer, rabbits, and other ground-dwelling creatures darted through the underbrush, their eyes wide with panic as they fled from the encroaching flames. The symphony of the forest, once a melody of life, had turned into a cacophony of fear. Unaware of the catastrophe unfolding around her, Daisy continued to care for her puppies. She licked their soft fur, her gentle touch a silent promise to protect them. Her ears twitched at the faintest sound, her instincts always on high alert. But the danger was still too far away to register as a threat. The hollow beneath the oak tree remained calm, shielded from the chaos that was spreading like a disease through the forest. It wasn't until the usual sounds of the forest, birdsong, rustling leaves, and the chatter of small creatures, were replaced by an eerie silence that Daisy sensed something was wrong. She lifted her head, her ears perked and her nose twitching as she tried to make sense of the sudden stillness. The soft crackle of fire reached her ears, distant but unmistakable. Her heart began to race, though she didn't yet fully understand the gravity of the situation. Moments later, the first hint of smoke wafted into the hollow. It was faint at first, barely perceptible, but it carried a sense of foreboding. Daisy's nose twitched furiously as she processed the unfamiliar scent. Her instinct screamed at her to run, to get as far away as possible, but a mother's instinct to protect her young rooted her in place. She looked down at her puppies, their tiny bodies huddled together in blissful ignorance. They were too young to move, too helpless to understand the danger that was closing in. Daisy stepped out of the hollow, her body tense as she surveyed her surroundings. The sight that met her eyes confirmed her worst fears. In the distance, a faint orange glow flickered through the trees, growing brighter with each passing second. The fire was still far away, but it was spreading fast, and the wind was driving it straight toward her sanctuary. Panic set in as Daisy realized the gravity of the situation. Her safe haven, the hollow that had sheltered her and her puppies, was now a trap. The dense forest that had once provided shade and protection was now a barrier that could hinder her escape. She had to make a decision, and quickly. The fire was relentless, a merciless force of nature that showed no regard for the lives it threatened. Every second counted. Daisy's mind raced as she weighed her options. She could try to carry all 5 puppies at once, but they were too heavy and too fragile for her to manage. Leaving them behind wasn't an option. Her love for them wouldn't allow it. The only solution was to carry them one by one to safety, but that meant braving the fire multiple times. Daisy took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew the task ahead would test her strength, endurance, and courage like never before. But she had no choice. Her puppies depended on her, and she would do whatever it took to save them. With the crackle of flames growing louder and the smoke becoming thicker, Daisy sprang into action. She darted back into the hollow and gently picked up the smallest puppy in her jaws. The tiny creature whimpered softly, but remained still, its trust in its mother absolute. Daisy stepped out of the hollow and began her journey into the unknown, her body tense and her senses on high alert. The forest, once a place of comfort and familiarity, had transformed into a landscape of terror. The smoke blurred her vision, and the heat from the approaching flames made her fur damp with sweat. Each step was a battle as she navigated the uneven terrain, her paws skimming over roots and rocks. She kept her ears perked, listening for any sign of further danger, and her nose worked overtime to guide her away from the fire. After what felt like an eternity, Daisy reached a small clearing where the air was slightly clearer. She gently placed the puppy down and licked its face, her way of reassuring it that everything would be okay. But there was no time to rest. The fire was relentless, and her other puppies were still trapped in the hollow. Daisy turned and bolted back toward the danger, her body moving on sheer determination. The second trip was even more grueling than the first. The fire had advanced, and the smoke was thicker, stinging her eyes and filling her lungs with every breath. Her legs burned from the exertion, but she refused to slow down. Her love for her puppies fueled her, giving her the strength to push through the pain and fear. By the time Daisy reached the hollow, for the third trip, the flames were dangerously close. The heat was intense, and the air was filled with the acrid smell of burning wood. The tree that had sheltered her and her puppies for weeks was now a towering inferno, its branches crackling as they succumbed to the flames. Daisy didn't hesitate. She grabbed the next puppy and began the perilous journey back to the clearing, her body trembling with exhaustion but her resolve unshaken. The fire roared behind her, a constant reminder of the danger she faced. Each trip tested Daisy's limits, pushing her to the brink of physical and emotional exhaustion. But she pressed on, driven by an unbreakable bond with her puppies. As the fire closed in, and the odds seemed insurmountable, Daisy's determination only grew stronger. Her journey had just begun, but one thing was clear. Daisy would stop at nothing to save her family. Daisy was no stranger to hardship. Her life had been a series of challenges that would have broken even the strongest spirits. Abandoned by her previous owners, she had spent countless nights wandering unfamiliar streets, scavenging for scraps of food, and avoiding the dangers of the human world. When she stumbled upon the forest, it had felt like a sanctuary, a place where she could finally find peace and start anew. She had made this wild, untamed land her home, learning to navigate its challenges and embrace its solitude. But nothing in her past could have prepared her for this. The fire was unlike any predator she had faced before. It was relentless, merciless, and unyielding, and it was closing in. As the flames crept closer, the once familiar forest became unrecognizable. The towering trees that had provided shade and shelter now loomed like skeletal giants, their branches engulfed in flames. The air, once crisp and fragrant with the scent of pine and wildflowers, was now thick with smoke, making it hard to breathe. Daisy's golden fur clung to her body, damp with sweat from the unbearable heat. Inside the hollow, her 5 tiny puppies were huddled together, blissfully unaware of the danger that threatened their lives. They were so young, their eyes still closed to the world around them. Their fragile bodies trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the warmth of their shared space. Daisy looked at them, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision she had to make. Time was running out. The fire was advancing faster than she had anticipated, devouring everything in its path, with a hunger that seemed insatiable. She couldn't carry all her puppies at once. There were too many, and she was only one. But leaving them behind, even for a moment, felt like a betrayal of the bond she shared with them. Daisy took a deep breath, her chest heaving as she tried to steady her racing heart. She had to act. Hesitation could mean the difference between life and death. With a resolve born of desperation and love, Daisy gently picked up the smallest puppy in her jaws. The tiny creature let out a soft whimper, but didn't resist, its trust in its mother absolute. Daisy stepped out of the hollow, her body tensed like a coiled spring. The moment she left the safety of the hollow, the heat hit her like a physical force. The ground beneath her paws was scorching, and every step was a test of her endurance. The smoke stung her eyes, blurring her vision, but she pushed forward, guided by instinct and an unshakable determination to save her young. She moved quickly, weaving through the underbrush and avoiding the flaming debris that rained down from the treetops. Her ears twitched, picking up the distant sounds of cracking wood and the terrifying roar of the fire as it consumed everything in its path. After what felt like an eternity, Daisy found a small clearing that was still untouched by the flames. The air here was slightly clearer, offering a brief respite from the suffocating smoke. She gently placed the puppy on the ground and licked its tiny face, her touch a silent promise that she would return. Without wasting a moment, she turned and sprinted back toward the hollow, her heart pounding with urgency. The second trip was even more challenging. The fire was spreading rapidly, and the once familiar path back to the hollow was now a maze of burning branches and smoldering debris. Daisy's paws burned with every step, but she forced herself to keep moving. Her lungs ached from the smoke, and her vision was clouded by tears, but she couldn't afford to stop. When she reached the hollow, the sight that met her eyes made her stomach drop. The flames were dangerously close, licking at the base of the tree that had been her sanctuary. The once sturdy oak was now a towering inferno, its branches engulfed in flames that crackled and hissed like a living creature. Daisy didn't hesitate. She grabbed the next puppy and darted out of the hollow, her body moving on pure adrenaline. The heat was unbearable, and every breath felt like it was searing her lungs, but she pressed on. The thought of her puppies, helpless and dependent on her, was the only thing that kept her going. Each trip became more perilous than the last. The fire was relentless, advancing with a speed and ferocity that seemed almost unnatural. The smoke grew thicker, turning the once vivid forest into a shadowy, apocalyptic wasteland. Trees that had stood tall for decades were reduced to ashes in minutes, their fiery remains collapsing with deafening crashes. By the time Daisy reached the clearing with the fourth puppy, her body was trembling with exhaustion. Her legs felt like they could give out at any moment, and her breaths came in ragged gasps. But she didn't allow herself to rest. The final puppy was still in the hollow, and the fire was closing in. Daisy turned and ran back toward the hollow, her body moving on sheer determination. The path she had taken before was now engulfed in flames, forcing her to find an alternate route. She leapt over burning logs and navigated through patches of smoldering grass, her instincts guiding her toward her destination. When she reached the hollow, her heart sank. The flames were now at the base of the tree, and the heat was so intense that it felt like her fur could catch fire at any moment. But there was no time to think, no time to fear. Daisy darted into the hollow and grabbed the final puppy. The tiny creature let out a soft cry, its body trembling in her jaws. Daisy turned and bolted out of the hollow, her body low to the ground as she navigated the fiery landscape. The journey back to the clearing was the most harrowing yet. The fire roared all around her, and the air was so thick with smoke that she could barely see. Her body screamed in protest with every step, her muscles burning from the effort, and her lungs begging for clean air. But she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. As Daisy neared the clearing, a flaming branch crashed to the ground just inches away from her. She leapt to the side, narrowly avoiding the fiery debris, and continued her sprint. Her paws, raw and blistered from the heat, barely touched the ground as she raced towards safety. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Daisy reached the clearing. She gently placed the final puppy down and collapsed beside her litter, her body trembling with exhaustion and relief. The puppies, oblivious to the danger they had just escaped, nuzzled against her, their tiny bodies a source of comfort and warmth. Daisy's chest heaved as she tried to catch her breath. Her fur was singed, her paws were raw, and her body was covered in soot and ash. But she had done it. She had saved them. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. The fire roared in the distance, but Daisy and her puppies were safe for now. She licked each of them in turn, her touch gentle and reassuring. Her body ached, and her vision was blurred, but her heart was full. She had faced the unthinkable and emerged victorious. But their journey wasn't over. The fire was still raging, and the clearing, though safe for the moment, wouldn't remain so for long. Daisy knew she had to find a more secure place for her family, a place where the fire couldn't reach them. But for now, she allowed herself a brief moment of rest. Her body curled protectively around her puppies as they drifted off to sleep, blissfully unaware of the heroism that had saved their lives. The moment Daisy emerged from the hollow with the last puppy, the situation had grown even more dire. The fire had consumed almost everything around the tree, and the flames were now licking dangerously close to the ground. The once familiar forest was now an inferno, a chaotic, hellish landscape of roaring flames, collapsing trees, and thick, suffocating smoke. Every breath Daisy took felt like fire in her lungs, and her vision was blurred from the tears streaming down her soot-streaked face. As she stepped out, her paws sank slightly into the scorched earth, which was so hot it burned her pads with every step. The last puppy in her jaws let out a faint whimper, a tiny, fragile sound that cut through the deafening roar of the flames. Daisy's heart ached, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. Her legs, trembling from exhaustion and pain, carried her forward, step by agonizing step, as she tried to navigate the fiery maze that had once been her sanctuary. Then it happened. The ground beneath her quaked as a massive branch, engulfed in flames, crashed down in front of her with a thunderous crack. Sparks flew in all directions, and the intense heat forced her to take a step back. For a moment, Daisy froze, her mind racing as she tried to process the impossible obstacle now blocking her path. The branch wasn't just any piece of wood. It was thick and heavy, with flames dancing wildly along its length. The air around it shimmered with heat, making it almost impossible to see beyond it. She was trapped. Behind her, the hollow was already consumed by fire, the flames crackling and snapping as they devoured what had once been her safe haven. The path she had used for the other puppies was now impassable, with flames raging on either side, and in front of her, this fiery barrier stood as an unyielding wall between her and the clearing where her other puppies were waiting. Daisy's instincts screamed at her to run, to retreat, to find another way. But there was no other way. She looked down at the tiny puppy in her jaws, its fragile body trembling against her teeth. Its soft whimper was barely audible over the roar of the fire, but it was enough to reignite the fierce determination in Daisy's heart. This wasn't just a challenge. This was a test of her love, her courage, and her unbreakable bond with her puppies. With the flames closing in and the heat becoming unbearable, Daisy made a decision that would define her legacy. She tightened her grip on the puppy, ensuring it was secure, and crouched low to the ground. Her muscles, though weak from exhaustion, coiled like springs, readying for the unthinkable. She was going to jump. The flames danced menacingly before her, taunting her with their intensity. The heat was so severe that it felt as though it could melt her fur right off her body. Her paws trembled beneath her, not from fear, but from the sheer physical toll of everything she had endured. And yet, in that moment, Daisy's resolve was unshakable. Her mind was clear, her focus sharp. This was her only chance to save her puppy. With a surge of energy fueled by pure instinct and love, Daisy propelled herself forward. Her body soared through the air, her fur brushing dangerously close to the flames. For a split second, time seemed to stand still. The world around her blurred into a chaotic mix of orange and black, the roaring fire fading into the background as her entire being focused on one thing, getting to the other side. But the flames were relentless. As she leaped, the intense heat scorched her fur, the tips curling and blackening from the fire's fury. The pain was immediate and excruciating, a searing sensation that coursed through her entire body. Her paws, already raw from the scorching ground, felt as though they were on fire. The acrid smell of burning fur filled the air, a cruel reminder of the sacrifice she was making. And then she landed. Her paws hit the ground with a jarring impact, the force nearly causing her to collapse. She stumbled, her legs buckling beneath her, but she managed to stay upright. Her body screamed in protest, every muscle aching, every burn stinging with unbearable pain. But she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. The puppy in her jaws let out another faint whimper, its tiny voice a beacon that guided her forward. Daisy pushed herself up, her paws trembling as she forced her battered body to keep moving. Each step was a battle, the ground beneath her still scorching, the air thick with smoke that burned her throat and lungs. Her vision was blurred, her eyes stinging from the tears that mixed with the soot on her face. But none of it mattered. All that mattered was getting to the clearing. As she neared the edge of the flames, a wave of relief began to wash over her. The clearing was just ahead, its cool, unburned grass a stark contrast to the fiery chaos behind her. The sight of it gave her a renewed sense of hope, a glimmer of light in the darkness that threatened to consume her. Finally, she reached the clearing. Daisy collapsed onto the grass, her body trembling uncontrollably from exhaustion and pain. She gently placed the last puppy down beside its siblings, her jaw releasing its grip with the utmost care. The tiny creature let out a soft cry before nestling against its brothers and sisters, its fragile body safe at last. Daisy's chest heaved as she lay beside her litter, her body covered in burns and her golden fur singed and blackened in places. Her breathing was labored, each inhale a struggle as her lungs fought to process the smoke-filled air. Her paws, raw and blistered, throbbed with pain, and her muscles felt as though they could give out at any moment. But despite the agony, Daisy's heart was full. She had done it. Against all odds, she had saved them. Her puppies, the tiny lives she had brought into the world and nurtured with every ounce of her being, were safe. With the fire still raging in the distance, Daisy mustered the strength to lift her head. She looked at her puppies, their small bodies huddled together in a comforting pile. Their soft whimpers and tiny movements were a stark contrast to the chaos they had just escaped. For a brief moment, the world felt still. The flames roared in the background, but in this small clearing, there was peace. Daisy let out a soft whine, her way of reassuring her puppies that everything was okay. She nuzzled each of them in turn, her touch gentle and loving despite the pain that coursed through her body. Her eyes, though clouded with exhaustion, were filled with an unyielding love and pride. As her puppies began to drift off to sleep, Daisy allowed herself to close her eyes. Her body, though battered and burned, felt lighter. She had faced the unthinkable and emerged victorious. Her journey wasn't over. She would still need to find a safer place for her family, far from the reach of the fire. But for now, she allowed herself a moment of rest. The fire may have been relentless, but so was Daisy. Her love for her puppies was a force stronger than any flame, a testament to the unbreakable bond between a mother and her young. And though her body bore the scars of her bravery, her spirit remained unbroken. In that clearing, surrounded by the tiny lives she had fought so hard to protect, Daisy was more than a survivor. She was a hero. The next day, when the forest fire had been finally contained, a group of rescuers, clad in protective gear, began their search for survivors. The once vibrant forest was now a desolate landscape, its tall trees reduced to blackened stumps and the ground covered in ash. The acrid smell of smoke lingered in the air, and the silence was eerie, broken only by the occasional crackling of smoldering embers. As the team moved through the ruins, their hearts heavy with the devastation around them, they came across the clearing. At first glance, it seemed unremarkable, a patch of untouched earth amidst the sea of destruction. But as they approached, they noticed something extraordinary, a golden retriever mix, her body burned and battered, lying protectively around a small pile of fur. One of the rescuers gasped, drawing the attention of the others. "Over here," he called out, his voice tinged with urgency and amazement. They rushed over, their heavy boots crunching against the charred ground, and knelt beside the dog. Daisy's body was motionless at first, her fur singed and matted with soot, and for a heart-stopping moment, they feared the worst. But as one of the rescuers gently touched her, her tail gave the faintest wag. It was weak but undeniable, a sign of life. The puppies, nestled closely against her, stirred at the commotion. Their tiny eyes blinked open, squinting against the daylight, and they let out soft, high-pitched whimpers. Miraculously, they appeared unharmed, their small bodies shielded from the fire's wrath by their mother's unwavering protection. The rescuers were overwhelmed with emotion. One of them, a young woman named Emily, gently scooped up the puppies, while another carefully lifted Daisy onto a stretcher. "She's a hero," Emily whispered, her voice cracking. "She must have carried them one by one to safety." The team worked quickly, ensuring that Daisy and her puppies were transported to the nearest veterinary hospital. Along the way, Daisy remained quiet, her eyes half closed, but her tail wagged faintly each time a rescuer spoke to her. It was as if she understood she was finally safe, that her fight was over. At the hospital, a team of veterinarians and technicians sprang into action. Daisy's burns were treated with the utmost care, and fluids were administered to rehydrate her after her ordeal. The staff marveled at her resilience. Despite the pain she must have been in, Daisy allowed them to handle her, her calm demeanor a testament to her gentle nature. The puppies, too young to understand the gravity of what had happened, were cleaned and examined. To everyone's astonishment, they were in perfect health. Not a single burn or injury marred their tiny bodies. It was a miracle, one that spoke volumes about the lengths Daisy had gone to protect them. News of Daisy's bravery spread quickly. One of the rescuers, deeply moved by her story, shared it on social media, accompanied by a photo of Daisy lying protectively around her puppies in the clearing. The post went viral overnight, capturing the hearts of people around the world. Messages of support poured in, with people praising Daisy as a symbol of courage, love, and selflessness. Animal lovers, parents, and even those who had never owned a pet found themselves deeply moved by her story. "This isn't just about a dog," one commenter wrote. "It's about the purest form of love, a mother's love." Daisy's recovery was slow but steady. Each day, she grew a little stronger, her burns healing under the watchful care of the veterinary staff. Her puppies thrived as well, their tiny bodies growing plumper and more active with each passing day. They began to explore their surroundings, their playful antics, bringing smiles to everyone who cared for them. Amid the flood of attention, offers to adopt Daisy and her puppies came pouring in. People from all walks of life wanted to give the heroic dog and her family a loving home. The veterinary staff, however, was determined to find the perfect match, a family that would not only care for Daisy and her puppies, but would also honor the incredible journey they had been through. Eventually, they found that family. The Johnsons, a kind-hearted couple with 2 young children and a spacious home, were chosen to adopt Daisy and her litter. The Johnsons had followed Daisy's story from the beginning and were deeply moved by her bravery. When they met her for the first time, it was love at first sight. Daisy, though cautious at first, seemed to sense that she was finally where she belonged. She wagged her tail enthusiastically as the Johnsons showered her and her puppies with affection. The family named the puppies Hope, Ember, Ash, Blaze, and Phoenix, a nod to the fire they had survived and the new life they were beginning. In her new home, Daisy flourished. Gone were the days of hardship and uncertainty. She had a warm bed to sleep in, a yard to roam, and a family that adored her. The Johnson children, Emma and Noah, doted on her and her puppies, spending hours playing with them and showering them with love. Daisy's story continued to inspire. The Johnsons partnered with a local animal rescue organization to raise awareness about the plight of abandoned animals and the importance of wildfire prevention. Daisy often accompanied them to events, her calm and gentle presence drawing crowds wherever she went. She became a symbol of hope and resilience, her story a reminder of the incredible strength and love that animals are capable of. Though the scars on her body remained, they were a testament to her courage, a visible reminder of the lengths she had gone to for her puppies. To Daisy, those scars were insignificant. What mattered was that her puppies were safe, happy, and thriving. For the Johnsons, Daisy was more than a pet. She was a member of the family, a living reminder of the power of love and sacrifice. They often recounted her story to friends and visitors, their voices filled with pride and admiration. And so, Daisy's life, once filled with hardship and uncertainty, became a story of redemption, love, and triumph. She had faced the unimaginable and emerged not only as a survivor, but as a hero. Her story touched countless lives, inspiring acts of kindness and reminding the world of the unbreakable bond between a mother and her children. In the end, Daisy's journey was more than a tale of survival. It was a testament to the indomitable spirit of motherhood, the courage to face overwhelming odds, and the incredible power of love. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more incredible animal stories like this one.